Hey everybody, welcome to RefTime, powered by RTS and produced by Coraggio Media. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Crane. We'll be covering rules, plays, points of emphasis, and all things official. Hey everybody, welcome to another segment of RefTime. We are going to have some fun in the studio today. We have with us the great Steve Skiles. Steven Skiles.
Skiles, yes. I'm constantly confused with Scott Skiles, who was an outstanding ball player from Plymouth High School that went on to Michigan State, and it never fails that I am introduced as Steve Skiles, and within a matter of 5 to 8 seconds, my name is converted to Scott. Everybody, partners, PA announcers, radio announcers, TV announcers, immediately convert my name to Scott. And when I see them later, they go, "Nice to see you, Scott." And I don't even correct them.
So are you related to Scott?
Well, I don't know that we've ever checked the family tree to see that we have any relationship family-wise, but I hold a very special place in his heart because the year Plymouth won the state high school championship, they were like 28-1, and I was the one.
Oh.
I refereed with Gary Cheeseman the only game that Plymouth lost the year they won the state championship. And that game was at Plymouth, the final home game of the season, against South Bend LaSalle, being coached by George Griffith. And it was a barn burner, and I remember that my best friend and my officiating partner when I was in college, Mike Pettibone, was the Plymouth varsity assistant. And at that time, we contracted games 4 and 5 years in advance. So nobody knew that this game was going to be of importance.
Okay.
Or nobody knew that Steve Skiles would be refereeing Scott Skiles. And, of course, everybody thought there was some kind of a family relationship. Mm-hmm. And I remember I made a call against Phil Wendell, a player control foul, and Mike Pettibone came flying off the bench screaming at me about how it was the wrong call and, so on and so forth. And I, of course, defended my position. And the interesting thing was I was spending the night at Mike's house.
Oh, wow.
And so they not only lost the ball game, but I then went to his house for the evening, and it was an extremely quiet evening at his house. So, but anyway, it turned out, as we looked at it, that was one of the best things that could have happened to Plymouth because it took all the pressure off of them. And it just happened that year that they played South Bend LaSalle 3 times. They beat them in a holiday tournament. They lost in the last game of the regular season, and then they played them in the Fort Wayne Semi-State and beat them in the Semi-State. And Mike, of course, says, "Hey, if you had to lose a game,
that was the one.
The one to lose."
Now, when you refed him, you said something interesting because that was back in 2-person days.
Yes.
Two officials versus 3. Now you caught that too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that stood out.
Yeah.
Now the guy you stayed with, you said that was the assistant coach?
He was the varsity assistant.
So he came flying off the bench. That tells me, again, back in those days, we didn't tech an assistant who came flying off the bench.
I couldn't tech the assistant because he was my best friend too. I gave him a long leash on that play.
You may not have had a place to stay that night.
Exactly. It would have been a cold night out somewhere on the street. So it was that has always been a talking point between the two of us going forward that was a great memory, and at the time it wasn't, but as it turned out. So every time I look at a memorable, I think Coca-Cola made a can that was identified the state champions. So every now and then at a flea market or something, I'll find one of those bottles or cans, and I'll always know that I was the number one of the 27 or 28-1.
So talk to us a little bit about, because you've got stories. We don't have enough time to hear all these stories. We're going to hear a few. So talk to us a little bit about why you got involved with officiating and when you got involved.
Well, I was in college. I was fortunate to get a 4-year full scholarship to Ball State to play football. And I realized after a very few practices that I wasn't really a good enough football player to play at the collegiate level. So I stayed. In those days, we still had a freshman football team, and all we were was we were fodder for the varsity. We were the opposing team for the varsity all week, and then we got like 10 minutes to practice by ourselves. And then we had a 5-game schedule, and I started out third on the depth chart at quarterback, and I worked my way up to start the first freshman game. And very soon was relieved, I think sometime after the first quarter. I was a throwing quarterback. Dave McClain had just been hired as Ball State's new head coach, and he was an Ohio State running quarterback man. So I didn't really fit into the scheme. Long story short, I played the sport in the fall, and then I went out for the basketball team because I thought I was a better basketball player. And they had already picked the team, but the coach said that I could come to practice if I wanted to. And, of course, I was in great shape. And I ran really well and hustled really well. And he said, hey, I don't know how much you'll get to play, but if you want to practice with us, we'd like to have you. And I thought, well, that sounds a lot more fun than lifting weights all winter. So we did that. And we had a really good freshman basketball team, and I played in about half the ball games. And my theory was shoot if you're hot. If you're not, shoot till you get hot. You know?
That was my theory.
So anyway, and then I went and played spring ball, and they moved me from quarterback to defensive end, and that pretty well signed my passion for the game was going to be over. So when I got out, I came home that summer, and a friend of mine in Bluffton opened a piece of mail, and this patch fell out. And I said, what's that? And he goes, well, I got my basketball license. And I mean, what do you mean your basketball license? He says, got my officiating license. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because I had done teen league baseball, umpired baseball. So I went and I found out that Muncie, we had an officials association in Muncie, and so I signed up to take the football, basketball, and baseball test, which was relatively easy to pass at that time because I was pretty close with the sports. And I will tell you, it turned out to be the greatest college job a kid could have.
Yes, sir.
And I try and talk to a lot of guys that I know are sports players that are going to college, and try and encourage them to do that because, and my partner was Mike Pettibone, who was the coach at Plymouth later on. And we were fraternity brothers and college roommates in our fraternity house.
Okay.
So when an athletic director had a game, it was one phone call, and he took care of everything.
Yeah, exactly. That's
so,
easy.
Yeah, we worked 110 basketball games our first season. We worked, 5th and 6th grade room tourneys. We worked chili suppers. We worked, and then on the weekend we worked JV, which paid $7.50.
Yes, sir.
And then
we're going back just a little bit, just a little ways.
And then
that is terrible.
I know. And then
back then it was considered good, though.
It was good money. And then on Sunday, we usually refereed church league, independent league, and that's where you really got a lesson. Because the church league lasted long enough for the prayer to end, and then church league became alley ball. Okay.
Yep. So, and you know what? That hasn't changed.
No, and you know what? But that's where you learned.
It is.
You learned
that's
how
where you
to
get your alligator skin.
You bet. You learn quickly there. So, we did football, we did basketball, we did baseball, and made, in a week we made $75, which was
great
huge
money then for a college kid. Yeah,
because every night at the fraternity house you could get a 12-inch sub and a 24-ounce Pepsi delivered to the fraternity house for $1.24. How about that? And so
I like that.
Hey, it was a great job. So, and the other thing was we traditionally worked those contests between 4:30 in the afternoon, and we were always done by 8:30. Well, our fraternity parties never started till 9, so we were able to go out, make some money, and be back and never miss a party.
You see why I wanted to have him on. He's got stories.
So when did the homework get done?
Oh, the homework. We were so talented, we didn't really need to worry about homework. But it was a great It was an absolutely great job to have.
Yeah.
And you know, we did it all for, and you know, you're just a college kid, but I always told coaches, I said, did you ever wonder why somebody wanted to be an official? Yeah, I kind of wondered. I said, it was kind of off the cuff, but I would go, well, because as an official, I'm judge, jury, and executioner. And you know, now you're a 20-year-old college kid, and you're
cocky.
Yep.
And you think you know everything.
You got all the power there is in the world.
Which is the worst person to have on the floor.
Absolutely.
I've been one of those.
Yeah. Until in the church league, you happen to throw out the guy who happens to be the athletic director at Monroe Central High School. Which is what my partner Mike Pettibone did one night, and so you know we didn't work any games at Monroe Central, to say the least. But that was a great place to cut your teeth on officiating and learn what you needed to. But I was also right there in the Muncie Association, and we had some absolutely outstanding officials. Bob Carr, Paul Cox, Norm Hathcote, Jim Wasalik, Gary Cheeseman, Steve Cherry, Ron Beard, John Ray. These guys took us under their wing, and they really cared. They wanted to make us better.
Now, these were high school officials?
These were high school officials.
So tell us, Steve, what year did you get started? Do you remember?
This is 1973. 74. This is my 51st year of officiating.
So that's when you got into high school.
Yes.
And then you went into college. How did you get into college?
Well, what you started doing in the high school ranks was you had schools like Taylor and Marion College.
And those were the lower level colleges back then.
Yeah, the NAIA schools.
Right.
And most of them had a B team schedule. They played a junior, kind of like a junior varsity.
Yeah.
And those games were usually assigned by the schools themselves because they had an assigner who did the games. But so we made ourselves available, and we would contact the assigner, and even the assigner sometimes would say, well, there's a B team game, come and work this B team game at Taylor. So we made the progression from 5th and 6th grade high school, or 5th and 6th grade grade school, to JV games, and then to high school varsity, then to college JV, and then at the college JV, it was just the same way as what the high school JV. You wanted somebody to give you a look, and they would observe you, and then if they liked what they saw, they came to you and say, hey, we'd like to put you on the staff.
Right.
Okay.
So I was fortunate enough to work some games at Taylor. I was well located. I mean, at Muncie, I was within 20 miles of 20 high schools and 4 or 5 colleges. So it was an easy drive, and we went and did those small college JV games, and then got hired to start doing conference games and start working small college varsity level.
When did you get, about what year did you get into that?
I was about 25 years old, so it would have been around the late 70s. Maybe 5 or 6 years after I started officiating altogether.
So you moved up rapidly.
Pretty quickly, yeah. And then at the age of 28, I got accepted and invited to be on the staff of the Mid-American Conference, Division I. And at that time, believe it or not,
men's or women's?
Men's.
Okay.
At that time, 30 years old was you about the youngest anybody would be. To get to Division I.
And you got there at 28.
And I was lucky. I got there at 28. I had gone to a couple of their meetings, and now my first year schedule, 3 games.
Okay.
I had a game at Wright State, which was being assigned by the Mid-American Conference, but it was a Division II school at the time.
Yep.
And then I had a game at Dayton. They were an independent, but the Mid-American assigned their games. And I had a game at Ball State, a non-conference game. That was my entire schedule, my first year.
Now, that was about what year? You remember?
That would have been about 1978, 79, something like that.
Okay, because I was thinking there's a kid, well, not a kid anymore, but this young man from Fort Wayne who played at Wright State.
Yeah.
That's Nard Hollins.
Yeah.
But I think he might have been too young.
Yeah, he was.
I think he came to Wright State later.
Yeah, and I had several players from Fort Wayne at Wright State later in there because I worked the Horizon League for a lot of years.
So now, two things. When we do women's college, and we were told probably within the last 5 years or so that you couldn't do both. You couldn't do men's and women's. Back when you started, could you do both? Because
there really wasn't women's basketball.
Good point.
The women's was still at high school. They were still doing GAA. All their basketball was GAA. wasn't even really affiliated with the IHSAA.
What is GAA?
It was Girls Athletic Association or
so.
something,
Yeah.
and they were individuals.
It was more like a club.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of like
sense.
club
Yeah.
basketball, and some schools did it, and some schools didn't.
Yeah.
So, but that is, in fact, I had a conversation with a young official yesterday for quite some time about the fact that right now you have to pretty much make a decision.
Oh,
Do you
you
want to
have
go?
to.
You want to go the men's way or the women's way?
Yeah, we worked with an older official at a school out of town about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was in a locker room with him, and he had that conversation, and I said, why is that? And he goes, it comes from the women's side. I said, what do you mean? He goes, the women are trying to establish their own way of doing things, and if you're an official and they catch you doing a men's college game, they will no longer let you do women's.
Right.
So it's you have to choose.
Yeah, the rules are different.
Yes.
The attire is different.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I told this young gentleman yesterday, at the high school level, you can do both. You can do women's and men's.
Right.
But I said, when you decide to do college,
You got to choose.
you have to choose one side or the other.
Yep.
And I said, you once you create yourself as a women's official, you cannot move to the men's game.
Nope.
No matter how good you are,
Right.
it's just not done. Just like if you're a men's official, you in some instances, I've heard of some guys who have morphed to the women's side on the downside of their career. I had it suggested to me, about, hey, why don't you, if they're still looking for officials for women's basketball, why don't you consider doing that? And I thought, I've been away from my family enough, so, and there's enough officials now, I think, that are coming up that are good enough that do that. So, but yeah, that is what's required at those levels now, which is different.
So when you were starting to get your career off the ground on the college level, you only had 3 games in your first season. So did you have a full-time job that you did?
Yeah. I've been involved in a family business for 46 years.
Okay.
I'm a third generation. I actually, when I enjoyed officiating so much that when I graduated from college and came to work for my father, I was kind of, I didn't know how much responsibility I would have, so I applied to the NBA. And I went to an NBA officiating tryout camp. And because I thought, boy, what a glamorous life that would be, having my job at home but flying all over the country doing pro basketball. And then unfortunately my father developed a serious illness and passed away 24 months after I'd been in business with him. So my responsibilities at the family business shot up.
Yeah, very quickly.
And I didn't think a lot of those guys at those times traveled by private plane, and I didn't think that I needed to put myself in a position where I might be ending up in a cornfield some night and I was responsible for a company that was employing 35 people and my family, and I didn't need to put my life at risk. I decided to put it at risk as a college basketball official instead. But so that was the reason for that. But I still am involved with the family business. So, which was nice because I had the time to do what I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. I wasn't restricted with things, because a lot of my partners in those days in college were school teachers who had to be, no matter what time the game was, they had to be at school the next morning.
Right.
Okay. I didn't have to be at school the next morning. I was very, very fortunate. So those guys went through some very strenuous late nights and were, there was a lot of pressure put on those people.
You know, that reminds me, I remember reffing with an older gentleman one time. At the time, he was older than me, and it was one of my first college games, and I was talking to him about I wanted to move up and get into D1. And he goes, well, there's a lot that you have to do there. And I said, well, like what? He goes, you'd be surprised, but most people on that level work for themselves. And I said, why is that? And he goes, well, think about it. He said, a college game may start at 8 o'clock. We have to be there sometimes, maybe the day prior, may have to stay after a little bit. He said, that may be a day or two out of a work schedule. He said people with a JOB can't do that.
Sure.
And I was so, wow, I never thought of that.
Well, and also you had a situation where Indiana was on a different time zone than Illinois.
Exactly.
So you would go do a ball game. For example, I would do a game in Green Bay, and it wouldn't start till 8 o'clock Indiana time. Now I don't get out of there till 10:30 Indiana time, and I got 6 hours to drive home.
Yeah, that's a long night.
Wow.
So yeah, and depending on where you, and now throw in weather.
Oh yeah.
Throw in,
and basketball is the heart of winter.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially February is the hardest part of the winter time, and that's where a lot of games go. It makes a lot of sense.
Well,
and a lot of younger people say, well, I want to move up, and they don't understand all the nuances.
And then, and I'm not throwing darts at you guys, but they started doing double headers with girls' games before the guys.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, for some reason, they always schedule a game to last 2 hours. And I've hardly ever been involved in a game that lasts 2 hours plus warm up for the next game.
Right.
Yeah.
So now they have the women's game at 6 o'clock with the men's game at 8 o'clock tip-off. Tip-off for the men's games now 8:20, 8:30. Now, that half hour doesn't sound like much until it's 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And you're driving, and all of a sudden you wake up on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
You know, and so the time change that was involved with Indiana and Illinois made a considerable difference, because most of our games were either in the state, in Ohio, or in the Illinois area. You know, so
that's a good point.
Yeah, that was interesting too. So, but anyway, the officiating thing just kind of morphed from there. I was very fortunate. You know, they will tell you that, you know, obviously you have to have some talent to be an official, but I still think that 90% of what happens now is luck. Being in the right place at the right time, to be seen doing what they're looking for. I mean, it just, John Adams, who was the national coordinator for officials, used to do something that was very interesting. He would go in, you know, because he would go to the camps, and he would put a number on the blackboard in front of these kids who were at the camp, and maybe it was like 1,400, and he'd go, you know what that is? He said, if every Division I college is playing basketball tonight, if we have 3 officials for every game, and we have a backup for every one of those officials, and we have another backup for half of the officials, 1,400 officials is the most we need in the country, in the entire country. And he said, so you know what? It doesn't really make any difference how good you are. You got to be lucky just to be in the right place at the right time to be considered. And if you think about that, I have known, you know, when you officiate at the smaller college level, and then you move to the next level, you become a clinician for the younger classes and so forth. I can tell you, there are a plethora of guys who we looked at and said, that's going to be the next big name guy. That's going to be the next big official. And 5 years later,
they're not even around.
They aren't even officiating.
Yeah.
I mean, it is mind-boggling what goes on in this avocation hobby, or whatever we want to say that it is.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah,
I've been in this, over 30 years?
Yep.
And I've seen so much stuff just at the high school and the lower college level, and I'm amazed at the people that come in and thinking they're going to rise to the top so quickly. And I just look at them and go, okay, well, let's get to work then.
Sure.
And 2 years later, can't even get a hold of them.
Exactly. Exactly.
So real quickly,
Yeah.
give us a career highlight.
Well, a career highlight, I've had several. I had 9 NCAA tournaments. I was in the 9 NCAA tournaments.
Good
I
job.
advanced to
Nice.
4 regionals. I think that I had a really good shot at maybe a Final Four, but it just it never materialized. But I always tell people that, because that is one of the questions: did you ever work a Final Four? And I always answer it this way: I never worked one, but I was qualified to work one. I just didn't. I wasn't in the right place
It's at
on the
right
right
time.
game at the right time.
Okay.
The absolute career highlight that I probably had was I worked the game between Wisconsin and Ohio State the year Greg Oden played for Ohio State.
Okay.
And it was in March, and it was when Ohio State was number 1 and Wisconsin was number 2. National television had never happened in the history of the Big Ten that number 1 and number 2 were in the Big Ten playing each other.
Wow.
And what's interesting is 24 hours before that, I was in Omaha, Nebraska, refereeing at Creighton with an impending ice storm that was coming.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
And I had
Wow.
no clue whether I was going to get back
Right.
to do the game. And
Wow.
I spent about 20 hours panicking and making travel arrangements, and I ended up getting to Ohio State 15 minutes before my deadline to get there.
Wow.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was a traumatic evening, but it was on national television. It was Billy Packer, and I'm not sure if it was who the other announcer. I know it was Packer, and
Was it the guy that's doing the NBA now?
it may have been. I didn't know if it was Jim. The guy who does a lot of who does the Final Four and everything
I don't know
for
who that is.
CBS.
Nance?
Yeah,
Nance?
Jim Nance. I think it might have been Nance and Packer.
So
But I'm not
now,
sure.
when you did that,
Yeah.
2 officials or 3?
3.
Okay.
It was Steve Welmer, Ted Hillary,
And you.
and myself. I had taken Ed Hightower was supposed to be the official, and he
Oh.
got injured. And so I got a phone call like a week before the game and said, hey, can you, Rich Falk was the supervisor of officials of the Big Ten. And he said, I need you to go to Ohio State on Sunday for a 2 o'clock national television game. And that was like, wow,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that would have been,
So your announcement to yourself is, I have arrived.
I thought so. I thought so. And it ended up being, I believe it was a 1-point game. It was like 63-62 or something.
Who won?
Ohio State won.
Ohio State won.
Maintain their number 1 status.
Wow.
But that was pretty special. But at the time, there were a lot of games that were really important that
Yeah.
were highlights. There was a couple NCAA tournament games that were highlights. I worked with Gerald Boudreau and Mike Sanzier in a game where at Cleveland in the NCAA, and we had, I believe it was West Virginia and Wake Forest, and Wake Forest was number 2, and they got upset. And I can remember that we thought that we had a phenomenal game. I mean, we thought, here's a crew that has the perfect mix. We have an African American, we have an Italian American, and we have a white Caucasian American. And we had a great game. We had an outstanding game, and we're all thinking, hey, we may go as a crew. This is a Final Four. We may make it. This is going to be great. And I remember that you would go home, and then Monday morning you'd get a phone call that you're moving to the next round. And
didn't
John
get that.
Adams calls me, who was our supervisor at the time, and he goes, Skilesy, I got to tell you something. He says, I'm looking at who's coming to the next round, and your name isn't here, and Sanzier's name isn't
Oh,
here,
no.
and Gerald Boudreau's name's not here. And
Wow.
it was like, you have got to be kidding me.
Wow.
So, the powers that be make the decision. It's the old golden rule. They with the gold make the rules. And we to the, I mean, if we would talk about that today, we would still say, we were the perfect crew
perfect
to
storm.
move on, and we never did.
So we're running out of time,
Yeah.
but I'm loving the stories, by the way. So tell me this. What do you think is a need for officials going forward? The game has changed, obviously.
Yeah. Boy, I wish we had another half hour. I am not, and this is, I want to express the fact that these are my opinions, and I don't want to offend anybody, but these are my personal opinions. I am not a fan of AAU basketball. I think
Us either.
I think AAU basketball
Has spoiled the game.
exactly. It creates an individual game and not a team game.
Yep. It's all about ISO.
Exactly.
ISO.
And the same thing with when you have an AAU tournament, what do you need? Officials.
Yep.
And when you have officials, what do you need? You need basketball players. So you need, so the two have to go together. But have you ever seen an AAU game officiated like a high school game?
No.
Exactly. So these kids, all summer long, are playing a game that they don't play once the high school season starts.
Yes, sir.
So all summer long, they don't know what a foul is because those games are rough. They aren't officiated. I mean, in all fairness to the guys that are officiating, because that's where we usually go and clinician people. And I talk to the guys that I clinician, and I say, why are you here? Are you here to make $30? Or are you here to get better and to move to the next level or be considered? And I said, if all you want to do is make money, I'm not going to waste a lot of time with you because you're not going to listen to me anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So and I've even had a situation where I've said, okay, guys, I want, in the first 5 minutes of this game, I want 10 fouls called. I want 10 fouls called in the first 5 minutes. We get done with 5 minutes, we've had 3 fouls called. And I go up and I go, guys, I saw 30 fouls. You called 3. So now we get into the high school season. These kids have been playing all summer long and beating the dickens out of each other. Now they get called for a hand check, and it's like, this is a different game. What is this? And the coach, I've talked to several high school coaches who said the first 2 to 3 weeks of their practice schedules, they have to try and orient these kids to a team game.
Yeah.
It's not an individual game.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
So-
the other problem is in AAU is that the coaches are typically their parents.
Exactly.
They're not their head coaches at the
Exactly.
schools. So these coaches don't know the rules.
Right.
They are only there to help little Johnny or little Sarah get better.
Exactly. And just like they think that anybody can referee,
Right.
they think anybody can coach.
which is not
And
true.
it is
Which again,
absolutely
we invite
not
you to
true.
come on to and officiate.
Sure.
Those of you that
Yeah.
officiate from the stand so well.
Absolutely.
And those that think they can coach, they think coaching is yelling at the officials.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going, Coach, why are you trying to coach me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not coachable.
Well, and here's the other thing that's sad is you now go to high school games and these kids have 7 coaches in the
Oh, yeah.
stands.
Yeah.
They got this guy yelling at this kid. They got this guy yelling at this kid. This guy yelling at this kid. In the meantime, the coach is trying to yell at all of them, and these kids don't know who to listen to.
Exactly.
And so they're confused. The poor coach is not being able to do his job because he's got too much interference. I mean, I thought the greatest thing about COVID
Yeah.
was we played games with no fans.
Yeah.
Fans. Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
And the nice thing about being involved as a 51-year official, I don't need fans in my games. You come to one of my games and you disrupt the game, I'll guarantee you're not staying around.
That's right.
And if you don't think I can control that, you just come and challenge me. I guarantee you that we'll clear a gymnasium if we have to.
Yep.
Yep.
But because this is about the kids.
Right.
And I'm sick and tired of the parents getting into this thing.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is they all think their kids are all stars.
Yep.
They all think they're going to sign an NBA contract.
Yep.
And the kids, the number of kids that have broken hearts because their parents have told them they're a whole lot better than they really are, okay, is sad. And I tell, when I speak in an athletic function, you hear these big name guys talk about, well, there's nothing will take the place of winning. There's only winning. If you come in second, you're the first loser, all that stuff. I said, I want to tell you something. You better learn how to deal with losing, because you're going to lose in life a lot more than you're going to win.
Yes, sir.
And the person who knows how to win and knows how to lose and lose with dignity, and learn from losing with dignity, is the kind of person I want to deal with.
And that's the real winner.
That is the real winner.
Yep.
And unfortunately, on that note,
we're going to have to sign off.
Yeah.
No, that's okay.
I told you I'm a talker.
Oh, I love it.
That's why I wanted you on.
And we're going to have you back on so that we can talk more.
But the first thing I'm going to do is, before we close out, Steve, in front of you, you've got a little piece of chocolate there. Okay. It's advertising our Hoosier 3-on-3 that's coming up. I want to remind people we have the Hoosier 3-on-3 tournament coming up at Turnstone on December 31st, which is New Year's Eve. And that'll be for kids. We also have an adult division. But I wanted to tie into what you were saying about parents, because with the Hoosier 3-on-3, it's no coaching. Yep. No coaching. It's the kids having fun.
Good.
Kids coaching themselves, having a great time. And I just want to remind you guys about that. So you want to get your kids signed up. And then also we're going to talk about Referee Training School real quick. Tanya, you can go ahead and remind everybody about that.
So Referee Training School, you can go to reftrainingschool.com. Take a look at upcoming dates that we have for basketball training and also volleyball training for those of you that are interested in becoming officials.
I guess I should also mention, I didn't tell you how, but Hoosier 3-on-3 is Hoosier3on3.com.
Yep.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off, send Mr. Steve on his way. Tanya's got to get going on her way. Steve, appreciate it, man. Thanks
I thank you for having me.
No, thanks for
anytime we can try and help make officials look like real people who have hearts, and just understand this: officials care about the game, and they care about the kids that we referee.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thanks
we really
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Thank you.
All right, you guys take care. We'll see you next time on RefTime. Thanks again for listening to RefTime, powered by RefTrainingschool.com and Hoosier3on3.com. Produced by Coraggio Media, RefTime is recorded in WELT Studios in beautiful downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana.
To join RTS, visit reftrainingschool.com. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Until next time.